He was a billionaire CEO, untouchable and feared, until one day, he disguised himself as an ordinary man and walked into his own store. That's when he saw his maid's daughter crying alone, and what he discovered next shattered his heart forever. Let's continue this story. The day began like any other, with the city streets buzzing and the sunlight reflecting off glass towers. But for one man, this morning would change everything. From the moment he stepped out of his sleek black car, something felt different. He had spent decades building his empire, a CEO recognized in every corner of the business world, yet a restless unease gnawed at him. Maybe it was the monotony of success, or perhaps a quiet voice inside him begging for something real, something unpolished. He walked into his store, blending in with the ordinary crowd, dressed simply, a far cry from his usual tailored suits and flashy watches. The staff greeted him with polite smiles, unaware that today, their boss had shed his corporate armor to witness life as a regular man for a few fleeting hours. As he wandered through the aisles, his eyes scanned the shelves mechanically, until a soft sound caught his attention. It was a stifled sob, almost hidden beneath the hum of the air conditioner and the chatter of customers. Curiosity pulled him toward the sound, leading him past neatly stacked products and promotional displays, until he found her, a young black girl, no older than 12, sitting on the floor, tears streaming down her cheeks. Her small shoulders shook as she tried to wipe them away with the sleeve of her worn jacket, but the sadness in her eyes was impossible to miss. He froze, something deep inside him tightening like a knot in his chest. There was a vulnerability in her grief that went beyond ordinary childhood disappointment, something raw and urgent that demanded his attention. He crouched down, careful not to startle her, and spoke softly, his voice gentle but laced with authority. "Hey, are you okay?" Her head shot up, eyes wide with a mixture of fear and surprise. No one had ever spoken to her with such calm seriousness before. For a moment, she hesitated, unsure whether this stranger meant kindness or ridicule. Then, slowly, she whispered, I just wanted my mom." His heart sank. He remembered the countless times he had walked past the people who made his life comfortable, the staff, the cleaners, the assistants, and never truly noticed them. He had built this empire on their backs, yet he had never seen their humanity. "What's your mom's name?" he asked gently, moving closer but giving her space. She sniffled, fighting to control herself, and whispered, "Maria. She works here. She said she'd be back soon, but she isn't." He nodded, pretending to understand, though inside, panic was beginning to rise. Maria? He knew her. She was the maid his assistant had recommended years ago when he first moved into the city, someone reliable and quietly efficient, someone who had always greeted him with a respectful smile. He had seen her occasionally, in the background, carrying his packages, cleaning his offices, but had never thought much about her life beyond her work. And now, in this small, crying girl, he saw the living proof of a world he had ignored. He gently took a seat on the floor beside her. "I promise we'll find her," he said, trying to keep his voice calm despite the storm of emotions threatening to break free. The girl looked at him suspiciously, as though she wasn't sure whether she could trust anyone anymore. "I don't know why she isn't here," she said quietly, her voice trembling. "She said she'd be back before lunch, and she never came." Something about the way she said it, the helplessness in her tone, cut him deeper than any business setback ever could. He had spent years negotiating multi-million-dollar deals, yet now, he was completely powerless in the face of a child's sorrow. He remembered his own childhood, the rare moments when his mother's love had been constant, the warmth of a reassuring hug, the security of knowing someone was there no matter what. For this girl, that anchor seemed absent. His chest tightened as he imagined the fear she must have felt, alone and desperate in a strange, bustling store, surrounded by people who were too busy with their own lives to notice. He realized that for all his wealth and influence, he had never truly understood what mattered most: human connection, empathy, and the simple act of caring. "Hey," he said softly, placing a hand gently on her small shoulder, careful not to overwhelm her. "Do you want me to help you find your mom?" She hesitated, then nodded slightly, her tears beginning to flow again. They rose together, moving toward the back of the store where Maria often worked. With each step, he observed the little things, the way the staff interacted, the unnoticed kindnesses, the moments of struggle that were invisible to him in his office high above. He had been blind, and the truth was breaking him from the inside out. Finally, at the back corner, they found Maria. She was frantically searching, her hands trembling as she held a mop and bucket, unaware that her daughter had been alone just a few steps away. When Maria saw her child, her face crumpled in anguish, and she rushed forward, scooping her up into a tight embrace. The girl buried her face in her mother's shoulder, sobbing uncontrollably, and Maria whispered words of comfort, rocking her gently. The CEO stood back, watching this reunion, his chest heavy with emotion. He realized that no amount of money could ever replicate this pure, unfiltered human connection. In that moment, he understood that life's true treasures weren't profits or accolades. They were the people whose hearts beat alongside ours, whose joys and sorrows shaped the world in ways we often fail to see. He felt a tear escape down his cheek. For the first time in years, he allowed himself to feel, not the calculated satisfaction of a successful deal, but the raw, undeniable truth of compassion. He realized he had been living in a bubble, surrounded by luxury and comfort, while missing the essence of life that mattered most. Watching Maria cradle her daughter, he silently vowed to never overlook the people who truly formed the heart of his world. Something profound had shifted within him, a stirring of conscience and care that would change not just the way he lived, but the way he saw every person he met from that day forward. After the reunion, the CEO lingered silently, unsure whether to speak or retreat. Maria held her daughter tightly, whispering comforting words and gently brushing the girl's hair from her tear-streaked face. He had expected relief and joy to linger in that moment, but what he witnessed instead was raw exhaustion. Maria's shoulders slumped as she set her daughter down, and the little girl clung to her skirt like a lifeline. Watching them, he realized that the world outside his office was far harsher than he had ever imagined. For Maria, every day was a battle, waking before dawn, working tirelessly, yet somehow finding the strength to love, to nurture, to protect. He couldn't shake the sight of her daughter's face, the mix of innocence and premature worry, the fragile hope that her mother would return. That look haunted him. He had achieved everything a man could desire: money, power, recognition. But here was a simple truth he could never buy: the pure, unguarded love between a mother and her child. It struck him with such force that his chest felt tight, his usual composure shattered. He wanted to do something, anything, to ease their struggles, but he didn't know where to start. The world he controlled in spreadsheets and board meetings felt meaningless compared to this tiny, messy, beautiful reality before him. "Can I help?" he asked quietly, his voice hesitant, unsure if Maria would even respond. She looked up at him, surprise flashing across her tired face. She had never interacted with him beyond the polite greetings when he visited the store or office, and here he was, offering assistance. Maria's eyes flickered with suspicion, as though she couldn't decide whether he was sincere or merely performing a gesture of pity. Yet there was something different in his expression, something unshakable, almost vulnerable, and slowly, she nodded. I don't know what you mean," she admitted softly. "I mean, anything you need," he said, taking a step closer. "If there's something I can do to make your life easier, I want to do it. I've never really noticed the people who make everything possible for me, and I want to start noticing." Her eyes widened, and for a moment, he thought he had lost her trust completely. Then, as she looked at her daughter and back at him, she nodded again, slowly, cautiously. "Okay," she said. "There are things, small things, but they matter." She paused, weighing her words, then continued. "Sometimes it's the little things that make the biggest difference: food for the kids, paying bills on time, keeping up with school. Life isn't easy, and there's never enough." Her words hit him like a punch. He had spent his life obsessed with margins and profits. Yet here was a woman whose entire universe revolved around love, survival, and the well-being of a child. He felt ashamed, a rare emotion for a man of his status, realizing that he had overlooked the struggles of those who kept his world running smoothly. And yet, amid the shame, there was a flicker of hope. Hope that he could change, that he could finally be more than a distant observer in the lives of those he had taken for granted. Over the next hour, he listened. He listened as Maria spoke of late nights and unpaid bills, of moments when she had nearly given up, yet kept going because of her daughter. He listened as the little girl, now calmer, told stories of school, friends, and dreams she barely dared to voice aloud. Each word, each sigh, each laugh cut through him, reshaping his perspective on life. He realized that the real wealth in this world was invisible to ledgers and balance sheets. It was the love, the courage, and the resilience of ordinary people. Without thinking, he made a promise to himself. This wasn't about charity or recognition. It was about being human. He would help them, not as a rich man handing out money, but as someone who had finally seen and understood. He would ensure that Maria's burdens were lighter, that her daughter could smile without worry, and that they would never again face the helplessness he had witnessed today. The idea felt unfamiliar, almost uncomfortable, but it was right. It was urgent. Just as he was about to leave, he noticed the girl staring at him. "Well, will you come back?" she asked quietly, her voice tinged with hope and fear. He crouched down, locking eyes with her. "Yes," he said firmly, a warmth in his voice he had never used in boardrooms or meetings. "I will come back, and I'll make sure things get better." Her smile was tentative but genuine, a small spark that lit the room. He realized that promises weren't about grand gestures. They were about presence, about showing up when it mattered most. That night, he returned to his apartment, but sleep eluded him. The memory of that crying child, the weight of Maria's exhaustion, and the stark contrast between their world and his own wealth haunted him. He thought about the deals he had celebrated, the accolades he had collected, and suddenly they seemed hollow. For the first time in his life, he saw success not as numbers on a balance sheet, but as the lives he touched, the hearts he could lift. The realization was uncomfortable, challenging, yet invigorating. It ignited a determination he had never felt before, a determination to use his power not for profit alone, but for good. By the next morning, he had made decisions that would change their lives forever. He ensured Maria's debts were cleared, arranged for her daughter's education, and made a quiet promise to remain involved, not as a boss, but as a protector, a friend, a human being who finally understood the weight of love and responsibility. He saw the ripple effect of a single act of attention, the way one presence could transform despair into hope. And as he walked through the city streets, blending once more into the crowd, he carried with him a newfound clarity. Life was not about being the richest, the most powerful, or the most admired. It was about noticing, caring, and acting when it mattered most. Days passed, but the image of that little girl's tear-streaked face stayed with him, haunting him like a shadow that refused to leave. Every meeting, every deal, every accolade suddenly felt insignificant compared to the reality he had witnessed in that small, crowded store. He found himself thinking about Maria and her daughter constantly, how they must have struggled, how tired they must have been, how invisible their hardships had seemed to him for so long. It was a strange feeling for a man of his stature, this gnawing urge to make a difference in the life of someone he had barely noticed before. Yet, it was insistent, demanding his attention in ways that business strategy never had. Unable to ignore it any longer, he returned to the store the next morning, this time without disguising himself. He wanted to see them, to check on their well-being, to make sure his promises were more than words. As he walked in, the staff greeted him with polite nods, and some whispered speculations about what he might be doing there. But he barely noticed. His eyes were fixed on the back of the store, scanning for Maria and her daughter. When he found them, the sight hit him harder than ever. The little girl was sitting on a worn stool, staring at a notebook, her brow furrowed with concentration. Maria was arranging the shelves, her movements efficient but tired, her expression one of quiet determination. It was a routine scene, ordinary in appearance, yet filled with extraordinary courage. He approached cautiously, unsure how to enter their world without frightening them. "Good morning," he said softly. The little girl looked up, recognition lighting her eyes, and a small smile broke across her face. "You came back," she whispered, almost in disbelief. Maria turned, startled at first, then her eyes widened in realization. She had expected him once, perhaps, but certainly not this close, this personal, this human. He offered a warm smile and said, "I promised I'd come back. And I meant it." Over the next few hours, he observed them, interacted with them, and listened. He learned things about their lives he had never imagined. the long walks to school, the nights spent worrying about bills, the sacrifices Maria had made so her daughter could have a normal childhood. Each detail chipped away at the barriers he had built around his own heart. He realized that wealth and power were meaningless if they were not used to lift others, to ease the burdens of those who carried the weight of the world on their shoulders silently. Without a word, he began to make changes. He arranged for the little girl to attend a school that offered her more than just education, a place where she could grow, learn, and feel safe. He provided Maria with resources that would free her from constant worry, allowing her to focus on her work without fear of what the next month might bring. Yet, he did it quietly, without fanfare, understanding that true help did not need recognition. He wanted their lives to improve, not because it would make him look good, but because it was the right thing to do. The little girl, sensing a change in the air, began to open up. She shared her dreams, her fears, her hopes for the future. He listened intently, realizing that this innocent, resilient child had already endured more than most adults ever would. Her laughter, when it came, was like music, filling the store with a warmth he had never associated with business halls or boardrooms. He watched as Maria's shoulders relaxed, the tension in her face easing, and he knew that small gestures could create ripples of happiness that no amount of money could buy. But not everything was easy. There were moments of doubt, moments when he questioned whether he was intruding, whether he was doing enough, whether his presence was helping or simply complicating their lives. Yet, each time he felt that hesitation, he reminded himself of the promise he had made, the promise to notice, to care, to act. And so he persisted, learning from them as much as he guided them, discovering that humanity was not about grand gestures or titles, but about consistency, empathy, and genuine concern. One afternoon, as the three of them sat in a quiet corner of the store sharing a simple meal, the little girl asked a question that would stay with him forever. Do you ever get scared?" she asked, her small hands clasping a worn pencil. He looked at her, surprised at the depth of the inquiry, and realized that she was asking about life itself. "Yes," he admitted honestly. "I get scared sometimes, but fear is what reminds us that we're human. It's what makes us care, what pushes us to act." She nodded thoughtfully, as if processing a lesson far beyond her years. In that moment, he understood that courage was not the absence of fear, but the choice to face it with love and compassion. By evening, the CEO knew something profound had changed within him. He had entered the store that morning as a man with a title, with power, with influence, but he was leaving as someone who had seen the truth of life, who had witnessed the resilience of ordinary people, who had learned that love and care were the real currencies of existence. Maria and her daughter had shown him what mattered, and in return, he had given them a promise of protection, support, and unwavering attention. In the quiet of his car ride home, he reflected on how a single moment of noticing someone's pain could alter the course of many lives, including his own. Life began to shift for Maria and her daughter in ways they had never imagined. Bills that once seemed impossible to pay were suddenly handled. Their modest home became a place of comfort rather than constant worry. The little girl's laughter returned, ringing through their small apartment like a melody long forgotten. Yet, despite all the changes, something else was happening, something deeper and more complicated than material relief. The CEO's presence, gentle but steady, was changing their lives in ways that neither Maria nor her daughter fully understood. He wasn't just helping with money or resources. He was showing them that someone cared, truly cared, about their happiness and safety. But life, as it often does, has a way of testing even the best intentions. One afternoon, Maria received news that shook her to her core. Her landlord, frustrated with previous delays, was threatening eviction unless the overdue rent was paid immediately. Fear gripped her chest, and for the first time since the CEO had stepped into their lives, she felt panic creeping back. She looked at her daughter, who was quietly drawing at the kitchen table, oblivious to the impending storm. Maria's mind raced. How could she explain to a child that their home might be taken away? How could she protect her from the fear she felt so acutely herself? In desperation, Maria reached out to the CEO. He arrived within the hour, his usual calm presence grounding her frayed nerves. He listened as she explained the situation, the urgency, and the shame, and he felt a deep, familiar ache in his chest. He realized that even with his efforts so far, the world had not yet been tamed for them. Yet, rather than panicking or offering empty reassurances, he took action. He personally visited the landlord, negotiating a fair arrangement, ensuring that Maria and her daughter could remain in their home without fear. Watching him handle the situation with quiet authority, Maria felt a mixture of relief and awe. This wasn't just a man of power. This was someone willing to step into their world and fight for them. The little girl, observing the scene, began to understand the gravity of life's challenges and the rare kindness of someone willing to intervene. She looked up at the CEO, curiosity and gratitude shining in her eyes. "Why are you helping us so much?" she asked softly, almost afraid to hope. He knelt down to her level and smiled gently. "Because someone once helped me when I needed it, and I never forgot how it felt. And because everyone deserves someone who sees them, who cares, who doesn't look away." Her small hands pressed together as she nodded, and for a fleeting moment, the weight of her young shoulders seemed lighter. But challenges didn't end there. Rumors began to circulate in the store. Staff whispered about the CEO spending unusual amounts of time with the maid and her daughter. Some were curious, others skeptical. The CEO felt the tension, knowing that appearances mattered to some in ways they shouldn't. He realized that helping people sometimes drew attention, and not always the kind one wanted. Yet, he refused to retreat. He understood that true help often required courage, the courage to face judgment and misunderstanding for the sake of doing what was right. Amid these struggles, a more personal revelation emerged. One evening, as the CEO helped the little girl with her schoolwork, she looked up at him and said, "I'm scared that things will go back to the way they were." Her honesty struck him harder than any business failure ever could. "What do you mean?" he asked gently. She explained how life had always been uncertain, how every day was a battle for survival, and how kindness often felt temporary. Listening to her, he realized that stability and security were privileges he had never truly appreciated until now. He promised her, quietly but firmly, that he would be there, not just for today, but for every day that mattered. The emotional intensity of these moments was overwhelming. He had come into their lives seeking understanding, perhaps a way to reconnect with something he had long forgotten about life: empathy. Yet, he found himself profoundly changed. The little girl's laughter, Maria's relief, the shared quiet moments, they became anchors for him, reminders that true influence wasn't measured in power or wealth, but in the lives one touched and the hearts one healed. But life, as ever, demanded a final test. One afternoon, a misunderstanding arose that threatened to undo everything. A rival in his business circles caught wind of his involvement and began spreading rumors, suggesting impropriety, insinuating motives that were far from the truth. Maria, unaware of these external pressures, became nervous, fearing that her daughter might be caught in some scandal. The little girl, sensing tension, clung to her mother, confusion and fear clouding her bright eyes. The CEO realized that his efforts could not stop at personal acts of kindness. He had to protect them from the world's harsh judgments, from gossip and suspicion that could harm their fragile sense of security. He addressed the situation calmly but decisively. He spoke to the staff, clarified the misunderstandings, and ensured that Maria and her daughter were shielded from judgment. He understood that kindness without protection could falter, that empathy without action could be misinterpreted. And through it all, he stayed present, a constant figure in their lives, proving that care was not temporary, that it could withstand the storm of human misunderstanding. By the end of that day, Maria and her daughter felt something they had rarely experienced, a sense of safety and belonging that wasn't tied to luck, chance, or fleeting gestures. And the CEO, watching them, felt something he had never experienced in his life of wealth and influence, the fulfillment that comes from knowing that, in this world, he had truly made a difference, not for fame, not for profit, but for the hearts and lives of those who needed it most. The days that followed were quieter, yet richer in a way the CEO had never experienced. He spent time with Maria and her daughter, not as a boss or someone with power over them, but as a presence, consistent, gentle, and unwavering. The little girl's laughter returned fully, bright and carefree, filling every corner of their home and the store where she sometimes helped her mother. Maria, for the first time in years, felt a lightness in her steps, the tension in her shoulders easing as she navigated life with someone who truly cared by her side. He watched them, understanding that the most profound transformations weren't in money or prestige, but in trust, stability, and love. One evening, as the sun dipped behind the city skyline, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, the little girl tugged at his sleeve. "Can you stay for dinner?" she asked shyly, eyes wide with hope. He smiled, feeling warmth spread through him. "I'd love to," he said. They gathered around the modest kitchen table, sharing simple food, but the atmosphere was rich with something money could never buy: connection. Maria laughed at a small joke her daughter made, and he realized that these ordinary moments held a kind of magic he had never encountered in boardrooms or luxury offices. It was real, it was human, and it was profoundly moving. As the evening wore on, Maria's gratitude surfaced in quiet words. "I don't know how to thank you," she said softly, her voice tinged with humility and awe. "You've done so much, and yet, it feels like more than help. You've seen us. You've truly seen us." The CEO felt a lump form in his throat. Seeing someone's humanity, acknowledging their struggles, and standing beside them. That was more powerful than any contract or deal he had ever signed. "You don't have to thank me," he said, sincerely. "You've shown me more than I could ever repay. You've taught me what really matters." Over the following weeks, their lives began to stabilize in ways that once seemed impossible. The little girl flourished at school, her confidence growing alongside her smile. Maria, freed from constant anxiety, could breathe, work, and live without the ever-present shadow of worry. And the CEO, once consumed by ambition and the pursuit of wealth, discovered a deeper purpose. He found that success wasn't in accumulation, but in giving, in nurturing, and in showing up for the people who often went unnoticed. His life, once measured in numbers and accolades, was now defined by love, empathy, and quiet heroism, the kind that didn't make headlines, but changed lives. Yet the most profound change was within him. Each time he saw the little girl's bright eyes, filled with trust and hope, he was reminded of the responsibility he carried, not just to his employees or shareholders, but to humanity itself. He understood, finally, that power without compassion was hollow, and wealth without awareness was meaningless. Maria had shown him resilience. The little girl had shown him innocence and courage, and together, they had unlocked something he had never known: the ability to see beyond himself and to care in a way that altered the course of lives forever. One afternoon, the little girl approached him with a small, hand-drawn picture. She held it out, pride and nervousness mingling in her expression. It was a drawing of the three of them, the CEO, Maria, and herself, smiling under a bright sun. "I drew us," she said softly, "so we can always remember." He looked at the drawing, tears threatening to spill, realizing that this simple gesture captured more than gratitude. It captured love, trust, and the bonds that had formed quietly but irrevocably. He knelt, taking her small hand in his. "This is perfect," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I'll treasure it always." The world outside continued to move at its usual relentless pace, full of deals, deadlines, and ambitions. But within the walls of their home and the quiet corners of the store, a different kind of world thrived. A world of care, presence, and human connection. The CEO had learned lessons that no lecture, no contract, no fortune could teach him. That noticing someone's pain, showing up when it matters, and loving without expectation were acts that could heal, uplift, and transform. Months later, he reflected on that first day. The day he had walked into his store in disguise, expecting nothing, yet finding a crying child who would change everything. He thought of Maria, her quiet strength, and of her daughter, whose courage had softened his heart. He realized that life's true victories were not the ones measured in numbers, but in the moments when one human being touched another in ways that mattered. That day had been a turning point, not just for them, but for him. He had found purpose beyond ambition, love beyond convenience, and meaning beyond wealth. As evening fell, the little girl ran to him, her laughter spilling into the room, echoing with joy and freedom. Maria watched, tears of gratitude in her eyes, as he knelt to embrace her. In that moment, everything aligned: hope, love, care, and the quiet triumph of humanity over hardship. He realized that sometimes the most extraordinary stories begin in the most ordinary places, like a small store, a frightened child, and a man willing to notice. And from that day forward, he promised himself that he would never turn away again. He had seen, he had acted, and he had learned that true greatness lies in the hearts we touch, the lives we uplift, and the love we give without expectation. The little girl's smile, Maria's relief, and the quiet sense of belonging they shared became the story he would carry with him forever, a story of hope, transformation, and the power of noticing. And as he walked home that night, he knew one truth with unwavering certainty. Sometimes, the smallest acts of empathy can change the world, one life at a time. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to like it and subscribe to our channel so you can get more heart-touching stories like this. Hit the bell icon to get notified as soon as a new story is released. Thank you.